everybody. My name is Minda Harts, and we're so happy that you're here. This is a pre-launch week for my upcoming book, Talk to Me Nice, The 7 Trust Languages for a Better Workplace. And I don't know about you, but trust is needed more than ever inside the workplace. And so all week we've been having the conversation, and we appreciate you for joining us. We are streaming on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, and YouTube. And so drop where you're at. How are you feeling? It's Friday if you're watching us live, and I'm so excited for this final conversation this week on one of the trust languages of feedback. And I couldn't think of a more iconic person to join the conversation with me. If you know, I'm sure you know her, otherwise you've probably been maybe living under a rock, but Kim Scott, she's a New York Times best-selling author. You know her for many books, but I know that one that we have in our bookshelf and we always refer back to is Radical Candor. And Kim has just been such a role model and mentor to me on my leadership journey as an author and a speaker. And she's always, whenever I message her, she's always responsive. And I trust her, I trust her. If she sends me something and says, hey, check this out, I trust her. And trust is not a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. And so I'm super excited to join the conversation with you all. And so I'm going to bring Kim up. Hi, Kim.
So good to see you this morning.
You too. And for those who may not be familiar with your work, would love to hear from you in your own words what you'd like people to know.
Sure. The book that has certainly sold the most copies is Radical Candor. And radical candor sometimes gets misused as an excuse to act like a jerk. That is not what radical candor is about. Maybe I should have called it compassionate candor, but radical candor is all about caring personally and challenging directly at the same time. And it's used as sort of a core management philosophy, but most specifically on how to give and, more importantly, how to solicit feedback from, up, down, and sideways, and it works at home too. So what you want to do is you want to be radically candid. That's when you care and challenge at the same time. You don't want to be obnoxiously aggressive where you challenge but you don't care. You don't want to be ruinously empathetic where you care so much that you fail to challenge. And you definitely don't want to be manipulatively insincere where you fail to care and also to challenge.
We see a lot of that behavior taking place in the world today. Yes, you do. Well, we have a lot to talk about in a short amount of time, but one thing I wanted to ground us in is a definition of trust. And I'm wondering, how do you define trust, Kim, when you think about it?
So when I think about trust, I think about it at sort of almost like an ethical way, but also it also implies reliability. Like if I say I'm going to show up at 8:15, can you rely on me to show up at 8:15? So, and I was thinking about it the other day. There's someone I work with who's going through a difficult time, an extremely difficult time. And I trust this person totally, but I know I can't rely on them to show up at 8:15 not because they don't intend to, but because they got other stuff going on. And so I think part of trust is also understanding and forgiving, when a person can't do what they say they're going to do. So I don't know if it's not a very punchy definition.
No, that's good. I'm wondering, for all the people watching us today, drop your definitions of trust, because trust is personal, right? And oftentimes it's a global language. So we all understand when it's present and we all understand when it's lacking, but how it shows up for me is different, how it might show up for somebody else. But I would also say that for me, trust is both a noun and a verb, and it's that reliability. It's that safety, right? Even if you say you're going to be at my house at 9 a.m. and you're not there, I don't have to wonder, okay, now it's 2 days later and I still haven't heard from you. You're going to send me a message and say something came up. Right?
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. I'll get there, something happened, but I wanted to let you know that I'll make it up to you. That's still somebody I can trust, right? Yeah. Because and so I think that trust is one of those things that oftentimes people just show up and think that it's automatic and that don't I look trustworthy,
Yeah. I think there's also an aspect of respect and trust. If I like, there was, I gave a talk somewhere, and I always wear jeans, the same jeans and orange sweater. That's just kind of like what I always wear. And some of the feedback I got was that it was a sign of disrespect for me to wear the pants I always wear. I was like, that is really weird. And so I think there's like this understanding the culture you're going into and making sure that you are showing respect in the way that people want to. But also, I think another part of trust is being willing to, like, I wished that the people at that company had been willing to assume a little bit of good intent from me. It was because I certainly didn't intend any disrespect.
Right. It's your uniform.
Exactly.
I'm glad that you brought that up because it makes me think of today's language that we're talking about is feedback. And
Yes.
for me, I know in my career, when I was in my former life, I always craved feedback, but I was never getting it. And so I'd
Yes.
always kind of link, well, I don't trust my manager. They don't care about me. They hate me because they don't tell me, give me any
Yeah.
feedback. Right. And I'd
Yeah.
create this narrative in my mind about my trust. And when I got underneath it, I'm like, wait a second. What you really want from your manager is feedback, but you haven't articulated that that is a need that you need. And
Yes.
maybe they're not just going to automatically give that to you. And so I started to think a little more deeper about how do I ask for it when somebody does, when it's not intuitive to them to provide it, right? And I hate
Yeah.
to say this, Kim, and to everybody watching, but when I was 17, 16 years old, I worked as a telemarketer. Maybe some of you had a telemarketing job back in the day.
Hard job.
And it was this one guy, and he was my supervisor. And I will say, even though he had no managerial training, he was like 2 years older than me. He would always give really great feedback. And he would ask me, what do you think? Right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about what I
Yeah.
said? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was the name for it, but oh, we're having a conversation. There's a feedback loop here. And I hate to
Yes.
say that he was probably the last manager that I had that allowed that type of interaction. So I would love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts about, any experiences where, feedback was it was a great thing, or you had to ask for it.
Yeah.
Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, the absence of feedback uh, is very, it erodes trust. If somebody is not telling you what they're thinking, you start to wonder what they're thinking. And in times when like there's been something physically wrong with me, and we're going, I'm going to the doctor and trying to going through this battery of tests, and I don't know what's wrong. That's the worst. But once I get the diagnosis, like then I can deal with it. I mean, luckily I haven't had terrible diagnoses, but it's always been a manageable problem. And so I think it's kind of the same thing at work. Things aren't perfect. Like we all know, hopefully, that we're not perfect, that there are things we could do better. And I think we all have this intrinsic desire to improve, to grow and do better. And it's not just about getting the next promotion. It's like the joy of work is getting good results. That's a very intrinsic joy. And we can't, as my son's baseball teacher said to him, you can't do right if you don't know what you're doing wrong. And it's my job to tell you what's wrong. So I think that if I go back and think about moments in my career, or especially early in my career, I had a manager. This was like my second job out of college, and I had a manager who said to me, Kim, you're really comfortable with ambiguity. And I'm not comfortable with certainty. I get bored really fast. Ambiguity may be my love language. But I didn't know until he gave me that praise that was an asset. I kind of thought it was a lie. I was like, because other people had said it differently. Kim, you're kind of sloppy. Kim, and he turned, his ability to articulate the positive, to look for the positive, was really kind of inspiring. All of a sudden, I realized that this thing I thought was a problem with me could actually be useful in certain circumstances. And at the same time, this same manager said to me, because I tended to, I think as women often do, kind of run myself down, kind of play this all shucks. And he looked at me after a meeting. He pulled me aside after a meeting one time and he said, "Kim, you're really good at your job, but you're not so good that you can afford to run yourself down that way." And I thought also that was a nice way. And that second job that I had was very healing because the job I had had previously was the opposite, where I got no feedback and I felt like kind of a dead man walking. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of a more recent time in my life. Both of us are public speakers, right? And so I was doing this showcase for bureau agents and in Washington, D.C. And it's something, Kim, that I had never done before. It was about like 12 speakers and you all had like 5 minutes to do kind of this thing in for different bookers. And I was really nervous and I had never like condensed all of my stuff in like 5 minutes in that way. And I was doing my trust conversation because this is a new, talk for me. So I wanted to get my 7 trust languages out. And I remember I was like sweating bullets, right? So I make it through, pretty good in 5 minutes. And then at the end, I seen somebody I knew in the audience and I asked them, I said, she's like, "Great job, Minda. Man, that's hard to do in 5 minutes. You did a great job." And I said to her, "Could I talk to you for a minute? You see tons of speakers, all of the things." I said, "I would really love some feedback. What did you love about the talk? And what do you think I could have done to improve it? Maybe not in that 5 minutes, but in the future." And she's like, "Wow, you really want to know?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really want to know." Because I want to be able to improve each and every time, right? And the feedback. And she's like, "So I have permission to give you the feedback." I said, "Yes, you do," right? And at that point, Kim, I was really nervous. I'm like, "What is she going to tell me?" And she told me, "You had the audience, was engaged, and that's really good. You had just enough jokes and this." And she's like, "But what I want to tell you is you could be bigger on the stage. I feel like you sometimes aren't as bigger. Like you could, you could." She's like, you're a big personality on the stage and you can be even bigger. You can showcase even more. You don't have to, make yourself small for the room." And I hadn't heard that before, but I took it right as the gift because I'm like, there are situations and topics where I do kind of just, I don't say it exactly how I want to say it or something like that. And it was really such a gift to me. And, what do you think about feedback as a gift? Do you see that as a truth or?
Yes. I mean, 100%. I think that feedback is a huge gift. And I think, the word like criticism, I'm going to say it even more sharp. Criticism is a huge gift, and as is praise. And I think we want to make sure that we're not giving this gift like you're giving food to a foie gras goose. We're not cramming it down people's throats. You want to make sure that you're starting by you're soliciting it. You're not dishing it out before you prove you can take it. And it is, I mean, one of the superpowers that people often say they want is to be able to know what other people think. And why do we want to know what other people think? We want to know what other people think because often we learn, very few people, I mean, there are some people, but I certainly can't notice what I'm doing wrong without other people. Somebody else usually needs to point out to me my mistakes. And people are reluctant to do it because they're afraid I will punish them when they do it. And that's true in so many different ways. It's true if I'm their boss, it's obviously true, but also I'm a woman. And so sometimes a man will be afraid to give me feedback because he's afraid he'll get called sexist or something. And then I'm depriving by not making it easy for him, I'm depriving myself of knowledge that my peers who are men are getting, for example. And I can blame him, but that doesn't do me any good. Like it's not fair, but I need to ask for feedback. I need to ask for that gift.
Yeah, I'm glad that you put it that way because I teach a course at NYU, and I'll have allotted, and we do a simulation on how to give feedback in like a performance review. And I'll have certain men say to me, I never give the women on my team feedback. I just don't feel comfortable. And I'm like,
That's
you
your
know,
job.
yeah, I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be managing.
Yeah.
This is not an option. Like, how do you think that all these, women on your team are feeling? Do you think they trust you? And he's like, oh, I never connected feedback to trust. And that was kind of the impetus for including, some of this feedback. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. What's the cost if we don't, or the consequence if we don't have a feedback type of culture that enhances trust, not erodes trust?
Yeah. I mean, so sometimes it's easy to think about a super simple example. So if we have the kind of culture where if somebody has spinach between their teeth, you just tell them and it's no big deal. You don't yell it out publicly. Yeah, you saving snack for later, Kim. You tell people quickly and privately you've got spinach in your teeth. That's a culture, we know that erodes trust. Like if you and I were having lunch for the very first time and I had spinach in my teeth and you didn't tell me, I'd go to the bathroom later, notice the spinach and think, gosh, Minda doesn't have my back. Why didn't she tell me? But if you do tell me, then you earn that trust. And so it's true not only around spinach in your teeth, which is a pretty low stakes kind of thing, but around all different kinds of mistakes that we make, and also relational things. Like if I'm doing something that annoys you or that hurts you, and I'm unaware of it, and you don't tell me, I'm going to do it again. And then you're going to be more annoyed. And then I'm going to do it a third time, and you're going to be like, and that's a vicious cycle. And by the time you do tell me, I mean, maybe you're more self-restrained than most, but probably the time you do tell me is going to be the time you missed breakfast, and you're not going to say it. And then I'm going to be like, why is Minda blowing that out of But the reason is it's been like, a repetitive stress injury for you. And for me, it looks like just that one thing.
I love that. I know something that you talk about in your work too that aligns with the new book, Talk to Me Nice, the 7 Trust Languages for a Better Workplace, is kind of, I think some people think feedback, you're being mean, right?
Yeah.
So how do we kind of take that out of it? Because, if the manager is giving the direct report some information, or a colleague is, giving some feedback, sometimes it's not, it may be perceived as mean. So I'm just curious your thoughts around the mean. You're the mean person, right?
Oh, so can I tell you kind of a long story?
Yes, please do.
So this happened to me. For me, this is the reason why feedback is a gift. This is my best explanation. I was working with this guy, we'll call him Bob, and I liked Bob a lot. He was smart, he was charming, he was funny, and he would do stuff like we were doing a manager offsite, and we were playing one of those endless get to know you games, and everybody was more and more stressed out and annoyed by this because it was a startup. We were busy and everybody just wanted to get back to work. Bob was the guy who had the courage to raise his hand and to say, I can tell everybody's really busy and stressed, wants to get back to work. I've got an idea and it'll be really fast and it'll help us get to know each other. Whatever his idea was, we were down with it. That's what we were going to do. So Bob says, let's go around the table and confess what candy our parents gave us when potty training us. Really weird, but really, I don't know if your parents did this, but my parents bribed me with candy, with Hershey.
I don't remember.
Well, the weird thing is everyone on this team remembered. Hershey Kisses were my bribery. And so then for the next 10 months, every time there was a tense moment in a meeting, Bob would pull out just the right piece of candy for the right person at the right moment. So Bob brought a little levity to the kind of quirky, kind of weird, but everybody loved working with Bob. There was just one problem. Bob was doing incredibly sloppy work, very creative, but lots of sloppy mistakes. And I was so puzzled. I couldn't understand what was going on because he had this incredible resume, this great history of accomplishments. I learned much later the problem was that Bob was smoking pot in the bathroom 3 times a day, which maybe explained all that candy that he had all the time. But I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that Bob was handing stuff into me and there was shame in his eyes. He knew it wasn't good enough. And I would say something to him, just trying to be nice, along the lines of, "Oh, Bob, you're so smart. You're so awesome. We all love working with you. Maybe you can make it just a little bit better," which, of course, he never did. And this went on for 10 months. And eventually, the inevitable happened. And I realized that if I didn't fire Bob, I was going to lose all the best performers on my team, because not only had I been unfair to Bob not to tell him, I'd been unfair to the whole team. Everybody was frustrated. Their deliverables were late when Bob's deliverables were late. They were not able to spend as much time on their work as they needed to because they had to spend so much time redoing Bob's work. And they were fed up, and the people who were best at the job, they were going to quit and go work someplace where they could do their best work. Because as we were saying before, people really want to do good work, actually. And so I sat down with Bob to start a conversation that I should have begun, frankly, 10 months previously. And when I finished explaining to him where things stood, he sort of pushed his chair back from the table. He looked me right in the eye and he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And as that question was going around in my head with no good answer, he looked at me again and he said, "Why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared about me." And now I realized that by not telling Bob, thinking I was being so nice, not wanting to be mean, I had to fire him as a result. And this was such a painful moment. You know, it was painful for me. It was painful for, much worse, actually, for Bob, painful for everyone on the team, and painful for our investors. We weren't getting the kinds of results. That had a very practical problem as well as an emotional problem. And as I thought back about it, and like, why did I do that? Why did I say this thing? "Oh, Bob, you're so smart. You're so awesome. Maybe you could make it a little better." Why did I do that? I think the reason why I did that was partly what I call ruinous empathy. I really did like Bob, and I really didn't want to be mean to him. But if I'm honest with myself, there was also something more insidious going on, which is what I call in Radical Candor, manipulative insincerity. Because not only was I worried about Bob's feelings, I was also worried about my reputation as a leader. Bob was sensitive in addition to being popular. And there's part of me that was afraid if I told him in no uncertain terms that his work wasn't nearly good enough, he would get upset. Maybe he would even start to cry, and then everybody would think I was a big, you know what. And that was the manipulative insincerity part. The part of me that was just worried about Bob's feelings, that was the ruinous empathy part. And I think this happens to all of us when it comes to feedback. It's scary. It's scary to get it. It might be even scarier to give it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that example, because I'm sure that many of us have been either Bob or been you, right? In those situations. And I was listening to what you were saying, it put me back into some seats, right, where I didn't want to have certain conversations. And I know we've all probably felt like, "Bob, well, why didn't they tell me this? Why is it the last?" But it's so awkward sometimes to have these conversations. And one of the things that was important to me with this next book was to provide some scripts, to provide some ways in which people can have certain conversations, or maybe they didn't realize that they even needed feedback as the gift, right? Or that was a trust language of theirs. And I'm glad that you use that example, because I think that all of us to some degree want meaningful and consistent insight, right?
Yeah. This is what I love about the title of your book. It's Talk to Me. That's the main thing. Say it. Try to be nice, but talk to me.
Yes.
At least, there have been times when I've gotten feedback that maybe wasn't so nice, but I would rather have gotten the feedback than not gotten the, I wanted them to talk to me. And then I, and whenever you get feedback, you've got to filter it. Sometimes you're going to get bias, prejudice, or bullying masquerading as feedback. but it's better to know like what's going on in the other person's head, I think.
No, I agree with you. You know, I gave the example of the person telling me that they didn't feel like I was big enough on stage, right? And that's subjective to that person in the moment, right? Listen, I identify as about 6'5", but you know, I stand at 5 feet, right? So there's only so much. so,
I'm
there's
barely 5 feet.
Yeah. So you know, it's interesting how people can view you. And also, Kim, I'll say is I took that feedback because there are moments where I can be bigger and maybe I may not say all the things I want to say because of the room, but you have to know your audience. But
Yeah.
I didn't overthink what she was saying. We also had a very small stage that you could not move around on. So that also was a issue. Right? So we're coming back to all feedback isn't necessarily things that you're going to, you know, put in your cap, but you can reserve it and kind of marinate and think about it. And I think also too, when people give us the feedback, maybe we could touch before we leave is, are we listening to what they're saying and how are we responding, right? Because part of it too is just because they give you that information, it doesn't mean that it's true or not true, but it's how we also engage in the back and forth. Are we having a dialogue about it, right?
Yeah. You know, it's funny about being 5 feet tall. So sometimes you get feedback from someone or just a description of yourself from someone. So early in my career, I worked in what was then the Soviet Union. And I was going to a meeting with this general director of a factory, and I was explaining to him how to write a business plan. And we were sitting down, and there was a KGB agent sort of swirling around the room because it was this was 1991, so it was unusual for Americans to be in this. It was a defense plant. On top of everything, so it was not surprising that, and the guy that I was meeting with later told me that the KGB agent asked him, "Who was that tall, intimidating American?" Like, in no culture am I tall, but it was, but I was representing, you know, the enemy superpower somehow, and so sometimes, you know, we represent something that we don't associate ourselves with.
Absolutely, but I do want you to accept that you are tall somewhere, right? You're tall somewhere. So
I think tall is not tall, I think, anywhere in the world.
I love that. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day, Kim, and I'm just want to give our watchers and eventually our listeners just one tip that they could think about either when they're giving feedback or soliciting feedback, because I think this is something that we all should normalize, right? In the ways that, again, enhance trust or erode trust. If you're giving someone feedback, is your intention to hurt their feelings, right? Or do you want them to grow from it? Is this an opportunity for growth, right?
Yeah. I think the first step is always to solicit feedback. So I'm gonna, if everybody listening to us today can take a beat and think about what's the question you're going to ask. Because if you say, "Do you have any feedback for me?" You know, I can already tell, "Oh no, everything's fine." Like, the way that you asked for feedback after you gave that 5-minute talk is perfect. So think about what's your go-to question. I like to say, "What could I do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me?" But don't write down because if you sound like Kim Scott and not like yourself, people won't believe that you want. So think about a way to ask the question that can't be answered with a, "Oh no, everything's fine." Like, not a yes, no question. Make it sound like yourself, and then consider the impact on the person who you're talking to. You may have to adjust your question. Some people may like a really aggressive question and other people may not.
I love that. And that's just a nice practical way that each of us can be thinking about these things. And the one tip that I would give is also allow people to respond to what you said. Yes. And if they don't have an answer in the moment, allow for them to, okay, let's revisit this conversation once you've had time to process it. Because I know, especially when power dynamics are at play, you know, you're trying to talk to your manager and, you know, we don't have to, feedback is also, let's have a two-way street, right?
Yes,
let's allow people to be able to have a conversation, not just this, I said what I said and now we're done, right?
Yeah. And you have to say it and say it again and say it. Like, it's never It's never one and done. It's a
Yes,
conversation.
I love that. And so again, thank you for the work that you do. For all you watching and listening, make sure you get Radical Candor. If you have it already, read it again because it's very important to have it. I think trust and feedback is a skill set. It's a soft skill that we need to continue. It's a leadership skill. And so I hope that everybody will continue to do that. And I hope you will support me on my next book. It's available on pre-order right now. Get it at your favorite bookstore. And, you know, let's keep having better conversations and let's think about what do people need from me and how can I give that to them. Any final thoughts, Kim?
My final thought is that everyone listening needs to buy not one, but 10 copies of Talk to Me Nice and give them out. The pre-orders really matter. So buy as many copies of this book as you can possibly give away.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate you. Thank you for just how you show up. And each and every one of you, think about how you're going to enhance trust when you walk away today, because somebody needs that from you, just as you want that from them. So thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.
Great. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much for having me, Menda.
Thank you.